All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors. So thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's grandparents, Dina Bas Pesach, Zechariah ben Zechariah, our Day of Learning sponsors, Sandy Hoffman, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of her father, Mayor Hirsch ben Shlomo Zalman, and our Daf Yomi sponsors for Parak Arvi Pesachim, Moshe and Chavi Abramson, dedicating the parak in the Schus of the Refuah Shalema for Daniel Meir ben Chana. And I will say with that, let us begin. We have a really exciting daf ahead of us today. I think we're all excited for the new start of Arvei Pesachim. We have a number of interesting pieces of halacha in Yirtzeh Hashem to go through today as well. So let's begin. So today's daf is Kuf, daf 100, and we are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem on daf Kuf. We're picking up 2, 4, 5 lines down from the top. Ulrafuna, minechas. Well, if you remember again, we left off yesterday with the statement that the Mishnah is with Rav Huna's interpretation of the Mishnah. So if you remember again, Rav Huna explained, we asked the kasha, and the kasha was, why does the Mishnah have to say Arvei Pesachim Samach LaMincha Lo Yochal Adamat Shetachshach, which tells me that I have to stop eating a half hour before Mincha Kitana. Right, a half hour before Mincha Kitana. What Rabbi says, I want to point out, what we call 9 hours into the day. Now what we're really going to see is 9 hours into the day means at the completion of 9 hours, which really we're going to see is what the halacha calls the beginning of the 10th hour. So the Gemara said, well, why is that a unique halacha by Arvei Pesachim? After all, again, the Brisa says, every Erev Shabbos, every Erev Yom Tiv, you have to stop eating at a half hour before Mincha Kitana. To which Rav Huna explained, no, that's only according to Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Yossi actually normally allows you to eat all the way until nightfall. On Erev Pesach, Erev Shabbos, on Erev Yom Tov, Erev Shabbos. But even Rabbi Yossi will agree that on Erev Pesach, you have to go ahead and stop eating at 9 hours. At 9 hours, a half hour before Mincha Kitana. Says the Gemara Ul Rav Huna Minecha. Is this true that the Mishnah works well according to Rav Huna? After all, V'ha'am Rabbi Yirmiyah Am Rabbi Yochanan, V'yiteim Am Rabbi Avo Am Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda B'Erev Pesach, V'halacha Rabbi Yossi B'Erev Shabbos. Yet Rabbi say we have a statement that says the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda on Erev Pesach, which is very beautiful, namely that on Erev Pesach you have to stop eating 30 minutes, a half hour before Mincha Kitana, what we call at the end of 9 hours into the day. But the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tiv, or Erev Shabbos. So I will say, so interestingly enough, the fact that we phrase it this way, so the Gemara says, halacha Rabbi Yehuda b'Erev Pesach, michlal de pligi Rabbi Yossi b'tarvayhu. Then I will say, now the fact that we say that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda on Erev Pesach and Rabbi Yossi on Erev Shabbos tells us that what? Sounds like, what is it saying? What is it saying? That Rabbi Yossi disagrees on Erev Pesach as well. That not only does Rabbi Yossi say that you could eat until nightfall on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tiv, but it sounds like Rabbi Yossi holds that you could eat until nightfall on Erev Pesach as well. To which the Gemara says, no, that is not true. Rabbi Yossi agrees that halacha l'maisa, you must stop eating at 9 hours, at the end of 9 hours on Erev Pesach. So I will say, so what's the machlokes? Listen to this. Lo halacha michlal de pligi b'hafsaka. So I will say, this is fascinating. The Gemara says no. However, there is, so here's what we know. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi will agree that on Erev Pesach, you really have to start. You can't eat from the end of 9 hours of the day and on. Right? We'll call it a half hour before Mincha Kitana. That everyone's going to agree with. There is, however, a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi on Erev Pesach. And what is that machlokes? That machlokes is regarding a concept called hafsaka. Now, hafsaka, Rabbi Yossi, means stopping. Now, what does this refer to? Take a look. So the Gemara goes out here. Desanya. Mafsikin l'shabbosos. David Rabbi Yehuda. Supposed to listen to this case. So, what about the following situation? What happens if halacha l'maisa, you began eating a meal beheter, right? So let's say I started my meal. We'll see. Let's say on Erev Shabbos, I started eating my meal on Erev Shabbos at a time where everyone agreed it was permissible to eat. But now Shabbos comes, or Shabbos is coming. What is my obligation regarding stopping that Su'udah? So here we go. So the Sanya mafsikin l'Shabbosos. You have to stop for Shabbos. I will say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. It's in the wider lines of the Rashbam, about 6 lines in Mafsikin l'Shabbosos. Im hischel Su'udah sabeheter kodem hamincha. If you began your Su'udah in a permissible way before mincha time, via ochav holich ad shetechshach, and now you're continuing your Su'udah up until nightfall. Afil Rabbi Huda mafsik Su'udah. So now listen to this. So Mafsigimar says, Mafsikin l'Shabbosos. Divrei Rabbi Huda. So also Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maisa, even if you began your meal, this is Erev Shabbos, even if you began your meal on Erev Shabbos, at a time that it was permitted to eat, but now Shabbos is coming, you have to shut it down. You got to stop the meal. Rabbi Yossi Omer ein mafsikin. Rabbi Yossi holds that halacha l'maisa, no, if you began the meal beheter, even though Shabbos is coming, you don't have to stop the meal. Now, what you do in that meal, according to Rabbi Yossi, you'll see in just a moment. You're both saying, now watch this. This is incredible. And the timing of this Gemara is actually quite amazing as well, because this was a very popular topic for this past Erev Shabbos, about having a Su'udah on Friday afternoon that would go into Shabbos Kodesh. So watch this, Rabbi Yossi. Listen to this story. There was an episode of Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, Shaim Subin Ba'ako. They were sitting together having a meal in Akko. The Kiddush Alehem Ayom. Now both say, they're having a meal on Friday afternoon. They began it behefter, right? They began it in a time when it was permitted. And what happens now? Shabbos is starting. Amar li Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi, Ritzoncha nafsik v'neichel shaliv Rabbi Yehuda. Supposed to now watch this story. So Shimon says to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi, do you think maybe we should stop our Su'udah in deference to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Now both say, those are fighting words, because remember again, Rabbi Yehuda is the disputant of Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is sitting with his Rabbi Yossi. They started a meal beheter at a permitted time. Now Shabbos is coming. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi, do you think maybe we should stop the Su'udah like the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara says, Amar lo. So Rabbi Yossi did not take this well. B'chol yom v'yom, ata mechavev devarai lifnei Rabbi Yehuda. Every single day, you accept my words over Rabbi Yehuda's words. V'achshav ata mechavev devarai Rabbi Yehuda b'fanai. And now, at a Su'udah at which I am a participant, you want to adopt the position of Rabbi Yehuda over me? Because remember again, according to Rabbi Yossi, what would you be able, what's the halach? If you started a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos, what do you have to do once Shabbos starts? According to Rabbi Yossi? Nothing. You don't do anything. Just keep going. Just keep going. So now Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi, maybe we should stop. It's Shabbos about to start. So Rabbi Yossi says, every single day you adopt my position of Rabbi Yehuda. And now, at a meal with me, you want to adopt Rabbi Yehuda over me? Listen to this, Rabbi Yossi. Hagam lechvosh es hamalkaimi babayis. Rabbi Yossi says, now this is the passage from Megillah Esther. Remember again, this is when at the second party, Esther reveals the fact that it's Achashverosh, that first of all, that she's Jewish, that Haman wants to kill out her people. I remember again, this Achashverosh storms out of the room. He comes back, and Haman had fallen on top of Esther. So Achashverosh comes back, and it looks like Haman is trying to have his way with Esther. So Achashverosh says to Haman, are you trying to conquer the queen with me in the same room? So it's interesting. So Rabbi Yossi uses this same lashon, ultimately again with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, to say, I'm sitting here at the Suda, and you know my position. You want to adopt the position of Rabbi Yehuda over me? So Amrle Imkain. Both I just want to point out something amazing. Some of the Rishonim bring down that when was this Suda happening? Or both say, when was this Suda happening? It was Erev Pesach, which was also Purim. That's why he quoted the pasuk from the Megillah. We'll say, isn't this incredible? The timing of this is absolutely incredible. 3 days after, 3 days? Yeah, 3 days. 3 days after Purim. 3 days after Purim, we'll say. So some say, what are they doing? They began their Suda Erev Shabbos in a permitted time. They were going into Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi, maybe we should stop, because Rabbi Yehuda says you should stop at the onset of Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says, stop. You know my position. You don't have to stop. You can keep on eating. You want to go and adopt Rabbi Yehuda's position right here at my Suda. Hagam chvoshes hamakai mi babayis. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi, you're right. We're not stopping for anything, right? Let's keep going. Shemayira hatalmidim v'hikvu halacha ledoros. Because there was another concern. Bepashtos, especially if this was the Purim Suda, there were other people around. There were talmidim, other students. Now Rabbi Shimon says to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi, you know what? You're right. Because the truth is, if we stop, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to see that we're stopping at the onset of Shabbos. And if they see us stopping at the onset of Shabbos, whose opinion is that? That's Rabbi Yehuda. And the Talmidim are going to see, you see that even Rabbi Yossi retracted his opinion, and Rabbi Shimon also supports, everybody supports the position of Rabbi Yehuda, and that is how we are going to establish halacha bosai. By the way, such an incredible yisod also. This is not just true for Talmidei Chachamim. This is true for anyone who serves in the capacity as a parent. Right? Remember again, every single thing you do for your child becomes halacha l'maisa. Right? Yikvu halacha l'doros. Whether we realize it or not, the things that we do become halacha for our children l'doros. The way they see us handle stress, the way they see us approach Yiddishkeit, the way they see us maintain our marriage, the way they see us maintain our homes, the ethics and morality we bring to business, and the way we interact with other Jews, all of that becomes halacha l'doros for our children. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, Amru, lo zazu misham ad shekaba halacha k'Rabbi Yossi. They did not get up from the Suda until they also established and taught publicly that the halacha in fact follows Rabbi Yossi, namely that halacha l'maisa, when you begin a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos. Now it's not really a chiddush, because remember, Rabbi Yossi, there's two halachas over here. Rabbi Yossi holds that you could eat already again ad shetechshach on a regular Erev Shabbos, regular Erev Yom Tiv, right? So Rabbi Yossi holds three things. Rabbi Yossi's regular Erev Shabbos, regular Erev Yom Tov, you can eat until nightfall. That's Aleph. Right? Here on Erev Pesach, he will agree with Rabbi Yehuda, namely, that you must stop eating from the end of the 9th hour, what we call the beginning of the 10th hour, a half hour before Mincha Kitana. Fine. What's happening over here is Rabbi Yossi holds that if you began a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos, you do not have to stop once Erev Shabbos comes. You could continue to eat. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, seems to hold that halacha l'maisa, you really can't eat on Erev Pesach, Erev Shabbos, or Erev Yom Tov for that matter, from the beginning, from the end of 9 hours and on. Furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda holds that even on Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, if you began a meal beheter, once Shabbos starts, you have to shut down the meal. So I will say it's interesting because the Gemara seems to indicate here who does the halacha follow. What does this sound like from the story? Who does the halacha follow? Rabbi Yossi. That's what it sounds like, right? They literally did not get up from the meal, or if it was Purim, maybe they couldn't get up from the meal, right? They literally did not get up from the meal until they established that the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. Also, I just want to point out over here, it's also amazing. You see from here also what it means. I mean, this is a little bit late for this year, but it's almost Purim, so we're getting ready for Purim early. You know, what it also means to have a real Simchas Purim. If this was, according to the Rishonim, a Purim Suda, we'll say, so a Purim Suda is one of Kiddusha. That ultimately, you see, what are they doing at the Purim? What are they doing at the Purim Suda? They're deciding halacha l'doros. Halacha l'doros, that's what the simcha of a Purim Suda is. It's not foolishness. It's not ridiculousness. That is ultimately, again, dvarim shebekdusha. It's Torah. It's tefillah. So that's what they're doing at the Purim Suda. Now, boss, and I watch this. Says the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Shmuel. We have now again. I still owe you a number of pieces of halacha over here. Fine. Well, so now watch this. I'm Rabbi Shmuel. We'll say this is incredible. So Rabbi Yehuda's name is Shmuel. In halacha, lo Rabbi Yehuda, but lo Rabbi Yossi. So I will say, amazingly enough, Rabbi Yehuda says the name is Shmuel. The halacha does not follow any of the aforementioned opinions. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, nor is the halacha like Rabbi Yossi. Meaning what, Rabbi say? So what do you do if on Erev Shabbos You started a meal beheter. So again, you started again. We'll say before 9 hours into the day, you started beheter, and now Shabbos is coming. What do you do, Ella? Pores mapa umekadish. Rabbi said, this is incredible. This is mamish, like this was the most popular sugya of this Purim. So what do? Pores mapa umekadish, which Rabbi said literally means you spread out a cloth over your table and you make kiddush. Now let's analyze a bit. So it says the Gemara. So let's take a look at Rashbam for just a moment. So Rashbam says, it's all the way down, if you look in Tulsa, Shayim Subin, right across there. Lo Rabbi Yehuda, Dar Mafsikin Masha Akira Shulchan. So Rabbi said, this is very interesting. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when Rabbi Yehuda says that if you began a meal, beheter, on Erev Shabbos, and now Shabbos is coming. So Shabbos came. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says Mafsikin. So the Rashbam says, interesting, what does Mafsikin mean? You remove the table. Akira Shochan. I will say, we're going to see this theme over and over. When they used to eat, they had individual tables. That's how they had. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, Mafsikin means you remove everybody's table. You remove the individual tables. So now comes along Shmuel and says the halacha doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda, but the halacha also doesn't follow Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi say? Rashbam says, Da'amar, ein tzarich lahaf seklal ela yigmor seudas afilu mishechashecha v'yivarchu birkas hamazon v'achar kach maybe lo koshin lekiddush hayom. We'll say, I just want to point out, this is fascinating because this is the rest of Rabbi Yossi's shita. So we'll say, how does Shabbos look like? According to Rabbi Yossi, right? What does Rabbi Yossi say? So if you began a meal beheter on Erev, it's fascinating. You began a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos. Now Shabbos comes. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you shut down the meal, you remove the table, you make kiddush, hamotzi, and start a meal again, a new Shabbos meal. According to Rabbi Yossi, I will say, what do you do once Shabbos comes? Nothing. Finish off your meal whenever you feel like finishing it. Recite Birkas Hamazon, bench, and then you make a kiddush. And then, as Rabbi Yossi, so comes along Shmuel and says the halacha doesn't follow either of those positions. Who does the halacha follow? A new position, Rabbi Yossi, called Pores Mapa Umekadesh. Now look at the Rashbam. This is incredible. Ella, Pores Mapa Alamachal, Kidin Kol Shabbos Hashana, Sheviu Lechem Hashulchan Kodem Kiddush. And Rabbi Yossi, now what does this mean? You literally spread a cloth on top of the table. Then I will say now the Rashbam says, we know this idea of Pores Mapa because we do this every week. What do we do this with? We do this with the chalas, right? We cover the chalas on the table at the time we make Kiddush. Now I will say we're going to see over here, we often assume that why do we cover the chalas? Right. So either two reasons. Either again, zecher laman, right? Because the man, right? The lechem mishnah was there for the man, and ultimately the man was covered by dew on the bottom and on the top. That's why you have to have something under your challah and something on top of your challah. Challah shouldn't sit on the table; should be something underneath it for that symbolism. But also because we have a bracha issue. Because technically speaking, the bracha of hamotzi ultimately comes before the bracha of hagafen. So as the Gemara says, shlo yira pas beboshto, we're going to say that there's another reason for it. The other reason for it is because Kiddush has to be the first thing that occurs on Shabbos, and the food is only supposed to come out to the table after Kiddush is made. That demonstrates that the Seudah that is being served is only being served al Shabbos. That's what the Rashbam is operating over here with. So now watch this. He says, for example, if you brought your challah to the table before Kiddush, what do? You go in and you cover it. Kiddush the come on, as we're going to see in just a little bit. I'm a base over here. Inay mishum siluk psura v'achach omer kiddush yom alakos v'chozer v'ochel v'gomer sudasa. So say now watch this. Now Shmuel suggests that if your suda goes into Shabbos, what you need to do is as follows. When Shabbos starts, you literally put a cloth over the entire table. Cover all of the food. Go ahead then, make kiddush, and then you can continue with your Su'udah. But what that does is, it transforms the entire Su'udah into a Su'udas Shabbos. So we'll say back to the Gemara. Ini, Is that true? Is that true that this process works? That if you have a Suda that's worse than now, again, I just want to point out, in this case, my Suda started in a permitted fashion. It's now running into Shabbos. So again, now Shmuel is suggesting, stop the Suda, spread out a cloth, make Kiddush, uncover the Suda, tada, now this is your Shabbos Suda, and continue. V'amar of Tachlifa bar Avdimi Amar Shmuel, kishem shemafsikin l'Kiddush Amadeis. Kach mafsikin lahavdala. But yet we learned that the same way that you stop for Kiddush, you also stop for Havdalah. So the Gemara says, so now, what does this mean? Abosai, remember again, whenever we see a lashon of mafsikin, we just saw it by Yehuda. The Pashtus, what does mafsikin mean? What does mafsikin mean? Akiras hashulchan, the removal of the table. My mafsikin, lav la akiras hashulchan. Rabbi says, so remember again, this goes back to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds halacha lamaisa. What happens if you started a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos, and now again Shabbos comes. Halacha lamaisa. What do you do? Rabbi Yehuda says mafsikin, and mafsikin we translate it as meaning you literally remove the table. See here I have a brisa that says again kishem shemafsikin lekiddush kach mafsikin lahavdalah. Does that not mean that if you began a meal beheter on Erev Shabbos and Shabbos comes, you can't just be pores mappa? Spreading out the cloth is not enough. You have to remove the table, make kiddush, and then bring the table back. To which the Gemara says, no, lo the mappa. No, and mafsikin could also just mean pores mappa umakadesh. It could just mean that all you have to do is stop eating, cover the food, cover the meal, make kiddush, and then you could uncover and continue. So we'll see, now watch this. Great story. Rabbi bar Avuna, ikla lebei Reish Galusa. So Rabbi bar Avuna went to the house of the Reish Galusa. Aisu tacha kameh. They brought a table out before him. Now both saying, this is not our case. This is a different case. If you look at the Rashbam for just a moment, see the Rashbam, ikla, Rabbi Rafuna, ikla b'reish galusa. You see there, Rashbam, it's the first wide line. So we'll say, here's the story. V'hachi pirusha, Rabbi Bar Bachan, ikla b'reish galusa, v'lo hayu ochlim kodim chashecha. So we'll say, so I just want to be clear. Up until now, we've been dealing with the case of Poris Map or Makadesh that we started with was a case where you began eating on Erev Shabbos, beheter, in a permitted fashion, your meal extended into Shabbos. So again, remember, we have three approaches. So we'll say, how do you deal with a meal that began on Erev Shabbos and now goes into Shabbos? Three approaches. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mafsik, which means what? Akira Sashochan. Got to be clear on this. You have to be clear on this. Right? So you can write it down if you need to. So Rabbi Yehuda says, again, Mafsikin, clear away the table. Rabbi Yossi? Nothing. Just keep going. And Shmuel, Pores Mapa Umakad. You got to remember these three because we're gonna need this for a little bit. Shmuel says Pores Mapa Umakadesh. Right? Those are the three shitas we have. This is a different case now, but we're going to see it's going to reference back. Rabbi Bar Avuna is going to the house of the Reish Galusa. Now both say they weren't eating before Shabbos, right? They came home from shul. Now look at the Rashbam. First wide line. Rabbi Bar Avuna, Eklala Reish Galusa. He went to the house of Reish Galusa. V'lo hayu ochlim kodim chashecha. There was no meal on Erev Shabbos. They come home from shul. Ula'acher sheyatzu mebeis hakneses hechshech. Now, what's this rabbis? They come home from shul. Already they get home, it's nightfall. Aisutacha lekameh. So what happened? Before they made kiddush, they brought the servants brought out the tables with food. This is before kiddush. Heviu es hapas al shulchan kimosha anu osin kodin kiddush paras mapa al alechem va'achar kach kiddush. So we'll say something. Sorry, let me go back to the story for just a moment. So keep your finger on that Rashbam. Shabar Afuna Ekla Beish Kalusa Aisu Tacha Kameh. They brought out the table before him. Paras Mapa. He spread a cloth over the table. The Kiddush, and then he made Kiddush. So now back to the Rashbam. So to fill in the blanks in this story, Rabbi Afuna went to the house of the Reish Kalusa for Shabbos. They went to shul. They came home from shul, and before they made Kiddush, the table with the lechem, with the bread, was already brought out. So what did Rabbi Rafuna do? He spread a cloth over the table, and he went ahead and then made Kiddush. V'achrakach Kiddush, lefi, I'm reading the Rashbam now, shebertzono lo hayu mavinas alechem ala shulchan ad la'achar Kiddush. Kiddusan lekamei, lefichach paras mapa lo ala lechem, v'hainu ke'in siluk shulchan u'kamisha eno. Now, boss, now this is very interesting. So ultimately, again, Rabbah would have preferred that halacha l'maisa, they would have not brought out the lechem at all. Rabbah would have preferred that no food would have been brought out until after Kiddush. But once they brought out the lechem, Rabbah went ahead and covered up the lechem. Now, I will say, if you skip a few lines down in that Rashbam, you see the Taima, you see where I am in the Rashbam? If you're in the wide lines of the Rashbam, it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines. And I will say a very important piece. The Taima kidipirish b'she'iltos Ravachaygon, the Parashas Vayishma Yisrael, the Kasabu Hachi, ukruve tacha mikamedel HaKadesh, l'kedusha d'shabsa, lo mekarvinon. It's really better not to bring out your table with food before Kiddush. Food should not be brought out until after Kiddush. My time, or what's the reason? Ki hechi detesi seuda liyikra d'shab. So this is what I mentioned before. Because we want to show, it's important to demonstrate that the seuda that I'm having is only coming out of deference because of the beauty of Shabbos. So I'll say, how do you demonstrate that your su'uda is dafka because of Shabbos and not just stamp Friday night dinner? How do you do that? By only bringing out the food after Kiddush. You see, if the food is there beforehand, then it could be Friday night dinner. And I happen to also make Kiddush on Friday night dinner. By waiting to bring out the food until after Kiddush is made, I demonstrate that this meal is dafka a result of Shabbos Kodesh. So, but however, if the food was already brought out, you don't have to take it off the table. So what do we do? Ella, pores alav mapa umakadesh. Shabbos says, so this is incredible. So the Shiltos brings down that halacha l'maisa, don't bring out food to the table before you make Kiddush. Because we want to show, and I will say, b'pashtos, this is referring to chalos also. It seems to me it's referring to everything. We'll distinguish a little bit. It's referring to everything. Because why? I want to show that the meal is happening as a result of Shabbos Kodesh. So the way to do that is nothing on the table, Kiddush, and then the food comes out. That shows that the food that comes out is attached to the Kiddush I just made. But says the Rashbam, but if you did bring out the food, you don't have to go out and bring everything back. Rather, what do? Pores mapo makadish. Just cover it up. Cover it up. The sanya, v'shavin shin mavinas hashochan, ela imkin kiddush, v'mhevi, pores alav mapo makadish, v'hecha da'aschil sudasa, midda'an har b'mali shabsa v'kadish aleyoma. And therefore, also going back to our previous case, because remember again, as I mentioned, Rabbah's case is not our previous case. Our previous case, you were eating on Erev Shabbos, and now Shmuel suggested all you need to do is Paris Mapo Makadish. Way back to the previous case. So therefore, again, if you started your meal Erev Shabbos, and the meal continued into Shabbos, Paris Mapo Makadish, umitamzeh, Nago Lifros Mapo Lelechem, Ad La'achar Kiddush B'Shabbos Al Yomim Tovim. So we'll say, this is incredible. Says the She'iltos, this is why we cover the Challah. The reason we cover the challah, interestingly enough, the Shiltos brings down, is not a din in brachas. It's a din that really the challah shouldn't be there. Why? Because nothing should really be on the table, says the Rashbam, ultimately again, until after Kiddush is made. But the challah is there. Now the truth is, we'll see, the challah is really there for another reason. The challah is there because the presence of the challah signifies kiddush b'makom su'uda. The presence of the challahs indicate to us that the su'uda is going to happen over here, and kiddush has to happen. We're going to see this sugya also. So let's just take it for now. The challahs really shouldn't be there. So how do I deal with the fact that the challahs really shouldn't be there? I cover it. So we'll say it turns out that there are in fact 3 reasons to cover the challahs on Shabbos. So number 1 is Zecher Laman, the metaphorical significance. Number 2, Shlo Yir HaPas Beboshto, which we'll discuss as well. The bread, so to speak, shouldn't be embarrassed. There's a bracha issue. Hamotzi really comes before Agafen by covering it. It's kilo, it's not there. But interestingly enough, none of those are mentioned over here. Here, the primary reason I really cover the challahs is because why? I will say why? They really shouldn't be there. they really shouldn't be there. Ultimately, food should not really come to the table until after Kiddush is made. The challahs are already there, so the way I deal with that ultimately is by going ahead and covering up the challah. So back to the Gemara. So therefore, what happened with Rabbah? So Rabbi Bar Afuna went to the house of the Reish Galusa for Shabbos. He comes back from shul. They brought out the table first. What did they do? Paras mapa v'kiddush. So Rabbi said, the table's not really supposed to be here. Fine, let's just spread a cloth over the table, and then we'll make kiddush. Tanya Namayacha Brisa that supports this. B'shavin shin mavinas ha'shulchan ela'im kein kiddush. You really should not bring out the table on Shabbos unless you first made kiddush. V'imhevi pores mapa umakadesh. And if you did bring out the table, ultimately again, before kiddush, you spread a cloth over the table and then you make kiddush. So both say, the Gemara says, Tani chada shava shein maskilin. So both say we have two different opinions. One opinion says, Tani chada shava shein maskilin. So one brisa says that both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi agree that you should not begin by Pashas on Erev Shabbos. And one opinion says that they both agree you can begin. So what's going on over here? So Bishlama Desanya Shavin Shein Maschilin. So the brisa that says that they agree that you can't begin Mashkachas La Erev Pesach. That could be Erev Pesach. As I also remember again, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi agree that you cannot begin a meal on Erev Pesach from the end of 9 hours and on. Rabbi Yossi, right? Everyone agrees with that. And in fact, that halacha, just I'll tell you right now, is codified in Shulchan Aruch. Simin Taf Ayin Aleph Sif Aleph Aser Milech Al Pas Misha Asiris Ulamayla Kadesh Yochal Matzah Lete Avon. You are not allowed to eat. The Shulchan Aruch calls it pas, but really what it means is you're not allowed to eat anything of significance from the beginning of the 10th hour, which is the end of 9 hours, a half hour before Mincha Kitana. You cannot eat anything, you really should not eat anything of significance, ultimately, again, from the end of the 9th hour and on. Shulchan Aruch goes on, you can eat a little bit of peros, a little bit of yurakos, a little bit of vegetables, some fruit, but nothing of substance. Everyone agrees. That's Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, that Erev Pesach, from the end of 9 hours and on, we try to avoid eating anything. Watch this. Elahad Disanya, Shavin Shemaschil Emas. But Rabbi say the brisa that says Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda agree that you can begin a meal. What is that referring to? Inem on Be'erev Shabbos, Hamiflag Pligi. If halacha l'maisa, we say that what? If you say that it's talking about Erev Shabbos, that's not true. They disagree. Because remember, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that really you can't begin a meal even from the end of 9 hours and on a regular Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says you can eat until nightfall. Lo kasha, kan kodim tisha, kan la'achar tisha. So we'll say ultimately, again, it depends when you're starting. Even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that if you began a meal before 9 hours of the day, that is permitted. That is permitted, right? So everyone will agree that if you began a meal before 9 hours, that's mutter. Now remember, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda will disagree about what? About what happens once you get to Shabbos. But everyone agrees that you can go ahead and begin a meal on Erev Shabbos and on Erev Yom Tiv before 9 hours. So the Gemara says, let me finish this. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, but Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi both disagree on Erev Shabbos. No, Lokasha, kan kodim tisha, kan la'achar tisha. We'll say, ultimately, the machlokes in Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi is only if you beginning a meal after the beginning of the 10th hour, after 9 full hours. Rabbi Yehuda says asr, Rabbi Yossi says mutter, but everyone will agree that one is permitted to go ahead and begin a meal prior to the 10th hour of the day. It's good. So we'll say, so essentially what we have is as follows. Let's try to close out a couple of things over here. So we'll say we have everyone agreeing on Erev Pesach that the halacha is we try not to eat from the beginning of the 10th hour on. After 9 complete hours of the day, i.e. a half hour before Mincha Kitana, don't eat. Don't eat. For sure, don't eat anything substantive. For sure, no meal. Everyone agrees with that in order that one goes into Pesach with an appetite. Erev Shabbos, we're still going to discuss. We see 2 other machloksim. Other machlokis is Rabbi Yossi again. What do I turn our machlokis and Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tiv? Rabbi Yossi says you can eat the whole day up until nightfall. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Erev Shabbos, Erev Pesach is just like Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tiv is just like Erev Pesach, only until the 10th hour. Okay, everyone, however, does agree that on Erev Shabbos, Erev Pesach, if you're beginning your meal, Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tiv, if you're beginning your meal before the 9th hour, that's mutter. Fine. So saying next area of contention is, I began a meal in a permitted time, and now it's coming to Shabbos. What do I do now? So let's go through our shittas again. Rabbi Yossi says, what do I do? Nothing. Keep going. Right? And again, what does it mean keep going? Finish your meal, and at the end of the meal, then what? Then bench, then kiddush. Amazing. Rabbi Yehuda says, shut it down. Shut it down. Akiras hashulchan. You have to take away the table. Shmuel says, Poris mapa umekadesh. Right? You spread out a cloth over the table, make kiddush, and then continue with your suda. It appears that the Gemara seems to favor Shmuel's position of Pores Mapa Umekadesh. Likes that idea. Rashbam quotes the She'iltos, so brings down that ideally we don't have anything at the table. Even the chalas that we have at the table, we keep covered. I'll also just point out over here something very interesting. If you take a look at Tosas for just a moment, so let's spend a few moments. The remaining time that we have, I want to spend on this Pores Mapa Sugya. Just for a bit, just to get a little bit of interesting halacha l'maisa over here. If you look at Tosas writes, "V'shavin shein mevinas hashulchan ela imken kidesh." So remember again, we start from the story of Rabbi Bar Achana that ideally we don't want to bring out our table until after I've made kiddush. So Tosas writes, "V'hada amin b'chol kisvei matzah shulchan aruch malach tov omer." So this is interesting because the Gemara Masechah Shabbos seems to indicate that it is a good thing to walk into your home and have the Shabbos table set, right? And when the Shabbos table is set and the malach comes out, that's a good thing. Lo kasha darachu b'makom acher. Ach in mevina also l'makom suda ad acher kiddush. Tosa says the malach likes it when your table is set somewhere else. But the ideal is you don't bring in a set table with food until after you've made kiddush. Now look what Tosa says. V'achshav shulchan shalom shem gidolim yosem midai. The kasha la'avim acher kiddush la'havsich ben kol kach ben kiddush la'suda onregim lifros mapa ulakadesh. So Tosa says, this whole idea of setting your table in another location and then bringing it in after kiddush works beautifully when you have small tables. Right? But our tables are big. So what am I going to do? I'm going to set my table in the kitchen and carry it in afterwards. So Tosa says, therefore today what we do is we do Pores Mapa. So if there's food on the table, says Tosa, chalus on the table, we just simply cover everything up. So Tosa goes on. He says, Lifros Mapa l'kadesh, v'atam mefurish v'shiltos, ki hechi detesi sudasa b'yakar d'shabsa. Shabbos says, so now Tosa quotes the same thing at the Rashban, the same shiltos, that the reason we don't want the food on the table until after Kiddush is because we want to make it clear that the food is coming als Shabbos. That it's a Suda Shabbos, not Friday night dinner. And therefore, if the food is on the table before Kiddush occurs, it looks like Friday night dinner. So therefore, the ideal is no food on the table. If the chal is there, you keep it covered. Kiddush, and then bring the food out. So both say this is indeed the halach on the Shulchan Aruch. So the Shulchan Aruch writes as follows. He says this is in Reish Ayin Aleph Siv Daled Hilchos Shabbos. Reish Ayin Aleph Daled. Aser Litom Klum Kodem Sheikadesh Afilu Mayim. So both say you can't eat anything before Kiddush once Shabbos has started. Vafilu Hischil Mi Ba'od Yom. And even if you started your meal beheter Friday afternoon. You started meal behanter Friday afternoon, and now it's Shabbos. Tzarach lahafsik shepores mapa umekadesh. So you have to stop. So interestingly enough, the way we paskin out of the three shitos we mentioned, when you started a meal behanter, and now it's Shabbos, we quoted a three-way machlokes. So say very important for a three-way machlokes. We quoted it again. Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Shmuel. We paskin like Shmuel. What do you do when you started your meal beheter and now it's Shabbos? Pores mapa umekadesh. That's what we do, Rabosai. We go ahead, we stop the meal, cover ultimately again everything in the meal, make Kiddush, and then uncover the food. And by doing that, it shows that the food now is coming als Shabbos. Okay, so there are other details. There's a whole discussion over here. Exactly what happens. Does one recite another Birkas Hamazon? We're not going to get into that right now. We have a little bit of time until this happens, and it's the next time for Purim. But I just want to point out something very interesting. So I want to share with you what I think is absolutely incredible. So Rav Hershel Schachter quotes in his Sefer Pinini Harav an incredible story with Rabbi Soloveitchik. So listen to this episode. So I'm going to read it to you. He says, Harbe Pamim, I'll tell you this outside. So the apparently the story goes like this, that the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, used to have like these weekends, and they always used to invite Rabbi Soloveitchik to come for the weekends. And ultimately, again, he says, so v'tamid sirei ba'amro sheb'Shabbos rotza lios beveso. The Rabbi Soloveitchik always refused. He said, I prefer to be home for Shabbos. So fine. One year, the story goes that they finally prevailed upon him to come for Shabbos. So what happens? He agreed. Listen to this story. Belel Shabbos, kishenichnesu l'chedra ochel achar atila. So Friday night, right, they finish Kalal Shabbos, they come into the dining room. Hufsa Rabbeinu liros, heich shaharbe ka'aros maleos kame mine ochlim, v'chinachalos hayumunochin ala shulchan kodem shekitshu. What happened? It's very common when you go into a dining room with a catered meal. What was that on the table? Food. It's ma'aseh b'chol yom. You go out, there's chalus on the table, the fish platter is on the table, the condiments are on the table. Rabbi Soloveitchik, v'hischel Rabbeinu litzok, shedavar zehu neged adin. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, my gosh, this is the Rabbinical Council of America. This is the Rabbi Shabbaton, right? This is the Mefurish Adin in the Gemara. You're not allowed to do this. Kimo shedi atosas Pesachim. Both like, that's the Tosas we just read. She'ein mavien b'shema shultos. She'tzrichim lahavis k'lam acham l'kavat Shabbos b'dachar la'achar ha'kiddush. So Rabbi Soloveitchik said, this is not the halacha. The halacha's food should not be on the table until after Kiddush is made. And the Rav made the waiters remove all of the food off the table before Kiddush. So what's this? Now listen to this. So he says, Upan el Rabbanim shalachatzu alav shiyava vishtatu. Then he turned to the Rabbanim who pressured him to come to the Shabbaton, and he said, Shalokein amarti lachem sheyoser tov yalachem lo eshtatev. Didn't I tell you that it's better not to invite me to the Shabbatons, right? Didn't I tell you that it's better just to leave it alone? So actually the story goes on. Rabbi Soloveitchik, I don't know where this took place. Rabbi Soloveitchik realized afterwards that ultimately, again, he realized afterwards that the waiters were Jewish. And so he felt very bad that he made the Jewish waiters do more work. And had he realized that the waiters were Jewish, ultimately, again, he would have just been Paris Mappa. But I left it alone. Rabbi said, the reason I'm telling you this is very important, because this, I think, comes up a lot of times in people's homes. Because sometimes people preset the table with things. You are not supposed to have any food on your table before Kiddush. Now again, we'll discuss, we have the chalas on our tables. But again, you're not supposed to have dips. You're not supposed to have your tray with pickles. You're not supposed to have your fish. Nothing is supposed to be on the table before Kiddush. Challah is the, I just want to point out, I want to say, even challah, you see Tosis and the Rashbam, it's not so pasha that you have challah there, right? If you look at this again, it seems to be in the purest form of the halacha, there is nothing on your table at Kiddush. Everything, including the challah. Like I mentioned, the challahs are there because the challahs occupy a different, or I should say the challahs serve a different purpose of establishing this as my makom suda. But you clearly see it's the same shiltus that's quoted ultimately by Tosis and the Rashbam. The shiltus would say not even challah. But I will say, okay, so I think our minhag is to have the challahs there covered, but it's clear that no other food should be on the table before Kiddush is made. Everything else comes out. So it's very important, especially if a person is having, again, halavai. We'll get back to the times as more and more people get vaccinated. We'll get back to the moments We'll get back to the moments ultimately again of, larger Shabbos meals in Meretz Hashem. I think we're already getting there in Meretz Hashem. We have to begin our proper steps towards getting back to normal in Meretz Hashem. Can't remain this way forever. So as we continue down that path in Meretz Hashem, especially as you have larger meals, Zev, you could close it. Right? So especially as we go ahead and we continue there. So remember, it's when you have a large meal, it's normal to want to preset certain things. But that is a problem, ultimately, again, in Shabbos Nabos. And what I will point out, not for our topic today, is whether or not this is a din dafka by just Shabbos night or by Shabbos day as well. So this is a discussion in the poskim. The pashtus, you don't, because remember, there is a distinction between Kiddush on Shabbos night and Kiddush by Shabbos day. But again, halacha l'maisa, one should avoid putting any food on the table prior to the recitation of Kiddush, with the exception of the Chalas. Right, so we'll stop over here for today. Meretz Hashem, we will pick up with, again, last line over here starts a new sugya, so Meretz Hashem will pick up here tomorrow.
Hotels we go to all the time. They have that first setting down.
Yeah.
Well, I never heard of this before all these years.
Maybe it's a raya not to go to hotels.
Maybe.
It might be.
But it's really interesting.
I can give you a building to donate.